Hello and welcome everyone to another Sales Hacker webinar. Thank you for joining us for the next 45 minutes to an hour or so from your homes. So hopefully this is giving you some social connection. And yeah, thanks for choosing to hang out with us during this crazy time. But we've got an excellent conversation lined up for you. Should be a fun one. What we're talking about is kind of the sales manager's secret weapon, which has always been, in my eyes, effective one-on-ones. That time that you have with each individual where you get to empower them, tease out what's important. And we are going to look at that through the lens of the world we now live in. So it's going to be the remote edition of one-on-ones. And just quickly before I do introduce my two awesome guests that I have with me, really quick housekeeping. So this is recorded. So if you have to hop off and your kids are screaming in the background, you got to go figure it out. Or, you're getting hit up from the team on Slack or whatever it may be. We will send this out within 24 hours. So it's all good. Number two, the three of us love hanging out and talking with each other, but it's always more fun when we get some audience engagement. We do these for the community. So if you want to jump down, put your name, title in the chat. It's always fun to understand who we're hanging out with. And if you have any relevant questions as we go, we would love for you to be in the driver's seat. So we're here to answer the questions that you have. But without further ado, I want to introduce my two guests. I am joined by Cara Felleman and Mark McWatters. Cara and Mark, welcome to the community.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
We're excited to have you both. And so Mark is the VP of Sales at Ambition. Shout out to Ambition for sponsoring this webinar. And Cara Felleman is the Director of Inside Sales at Resy. But you two are so much more than that. You've had incredible backgrounds. So Cara, starting with you, do you mind giving the quick superhero origin story of how you got to where you're at today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm based in New York and I've been here for about 6 years. I started off in a, boiler room setting sales, inside sales, 200 calls a day. We've all been there. We, put it in the back. And was a top performer, quickly moved into management, sales training, was an individual contributor. And then I said, you know what, I want to be a manager. And then I said, want to go back to individual contributing. I wasn't really mature enough and mentally ready to be a manager. And I recognized that, which was definitely difficult to comprehend at the time. I went and did enterprise sales and then realized, you know what, I really do miss helping others and building process. So about 3 years ago now, I joined Resy and built the inside sales team from the bottom up. And now we're in 2 different offices with about 20 plus people. So that's where I am today.
I love it. I love it. I feel like so many of us had this. I know I worked in what I would now consider, didn't know it at the time, but would definitely consider a boiler room. There's no other word for it. Like, it was so high intensity, like basically get credit cards over the phone. It's just wild to think that still exists. But I also think, in a really strange and odd way, like, you get so many at-bats that you just learn people on like a whole other level. So I think we all try and forget about it, but it also, I think, builds our skills. Yeah. That's really cool. I have a quick question there. So when you kind of tested out, I'm going to grill you on this a little bit,
Yeah,
tested out leadership, and then we're like, hey, maybe I'm not fully ready for it. What was that? Because I think a lot of people can relate to that. Certainly, I don't run a big team or anything right now, and I've got all this freedom, and I'm like, I really like this freedom, but I also love leading. Can you walk me through just your thought process of what that was like and how you made the mature decision to, go into being an individual contributor for a while?
Definitely. So I think that being at a startup, sometimes people just tap you and say, hey, you'd be a great manager. And a lot of times people think, if you're an incredible salesperson, that you'd be a great manager. Unfortunately, that's not always the case, because what makes someone an incredible salesperson is being controlling, right? Controlling their own pipeline, controlling their destiny, and having a really strong work ethic. And to be a manager, you have to have a lot more empathy and understanding that not everyone is going to have the same work ethic that you do, and not everyone's going to get it. And I think that at 23 years old, I didn't really understand that. I didn't understand why people weren't working as hard. I didn't have the emotional intelligence, and I really prided myself on being someone that was mature. But when it came down to really understanding how people operate and what motivates them, it's so individualized, and I just wasn't there. So, you know, my team was performing well, but I don't think that that's an indicator of a great manager. An indicator of a great manager is the team performs and they respect you and they want to work for you. And there's so much more. And I was just missing a couple of those elements. So I decided to take a different route, and also had experience with different managers. Then I started to realize, oh, there's different types of styles and different types of motivations. And then realized, this is a good opportunity for me to go back into what I actually truly enjoy, which is when someone comes back to you and is like, I did it. And you're like, yes, we did it together, right? That feeling, I really missed.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I think many of us can relate to that on a lot of levels. And totally, I remember personally, like this, it's such a weird realization that not everyone thinks like me, but like this worked for me. So everyone should think like this because it worked, but everyone is unique, and I like it. All right, Mark, my man, good to be reunited.
What's up, Scott?
So we're back, man. For those who are listening to this, hanging out with us, Mark and I were actually on the Flip the Script tour together for the first, a large portion of the first kind of half. And we got to know each other very well, and he's become a dear friend. So excited to have you back, man. Tell everyone, how did you get to Ambition? You've got such a cool story. Would love it if you could share it with the community.
Sure. So started in sales as an appointment setter for a mobile home company. So I'm in Nashville. For those of you that aren't in the South, these are trailers. It was a really sexy first sales gig, but it was kind of that boiler room mentality, which is such a great place to learn. Ultimately went to work, or after that went to work for AT&T, went through the big company training, learned a ton about this specific topic, about how to have a one-on-one conversation, before realizing that tech was where I really wanted to be. Coming to Ambition as one of the first salespeople, really believed in what we were doing. By the way, we're gamification and coaching software, and now lead my team. I got my job by volunteering to be the interim head of sales at no cost to my founders for 1 quarter while they found their next sales leader, and became the bar that they were interviewing off of, and am still here. So every time I talk to salespeople who are like, how did you get to your role so quickly, and telling that story hopefully helps somebody else. But excited to be here. I mean, the thing about one-on-one coaching that I think is in my current role that is most relevant is Ambition has about 3,000 managers in our platform that are using one-on-ones. And it's something I've always been very passionate about as a non-negotiable of leading a team. And now that we're remote, the non-negotiableness is much higher. The need to connect with your team obviously is on a whole nother level and a different challenge. So happy to be here in my kitchen. If you hear a 3-year-old screaming or a 6-month-old who spit up on the shirt like 30 minutes ago, welcome to work from home, Corona 2020.
I love it. Thanks for sharing, man. I really enjoy your story. And for those people that, I know we're in a difficult time for a lot of folks, and there could be people on this that maybe were recently let go, maybe are fearing recently let go. And I want to highlight something in that story of, putting yourself out there and taking that risk of, the long-term vision versus the short-term, where you offered, I'm going to manage and lead the team for free. I think that given this current environment will go really far. So thinking in those kind of terms, when you're looking for a new position can be really helpful. I think in this chaotic time we're in, gives are worth double. Well, asks are also worth double. So if you're giving something to someone, that's worth double the weight. And if you're asking for something, that's also worth double the weight. So keep that in mind. Okay, so I want to do a quick poll. Let's get everyone kind of involved, get a sense of where people are at with their one-on-ones. And the question is, which best describes the style of your one-on-ones last quarter? Cara, where do you think we're gonna fall? What's your guess?
My guess is it's going to be somewhere in the middle between a formal and informal one-on-one style. And then we're going to kind of be able to figure out, is it role specific, tenure specific, that's really focusing on the, formality versus informality. But I think in between those two.
I'm with you. Mark, what do you think?
I hope like hell it's formal, but I think it's going to be random. If people are being honest, although if we got a lot of sales leaders on here, they're the worst at lying and saying they don't actually do them. So be real, people.
Yeah. Yeah, this isn't best case scenario. This isn't the thing that's on your calendar that you always.
Yeah, we're not going to report out who's not doing it. Okay.
All right, we will stop in 3, 2, 1. All right, so we have the majority coming from informal, 42%. Random is the second one, 30%, and only 28% had a formal one-on-one structure, which is crazy, but kind of similar to what we expected. Mark, does this blow you away? Is this what you see in the market typically?
This, maybe this is me being a skeptic, but informal one-on-ones to me is people who aren't doing them all that often, who are just still claiming they have something. I guess this is pretty in line. I mean, there's such a challenge right now with the conversation even happening, which we can dig into, but I'd say this is about par for what I'd expect.
Cara, what do you think about these?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Most people are probably, I think, Mark, you're right, are kind of leaning towards, I want to be more formal, but reality is I'm probably not. But I think informal has, the sliding scale, and we're probably the random informal. But I think after this call, hopefully we can be a little bit more towards the formal side and give people some structure, because right now everyone's lacking the structure that they typically have.
Yeah, totally. All right, so we've got a great discussion lined up, but we have such a good question right now that I'm going to go to it right away because I really like it. So this is anonymous. They didn't give us their name, but most one-on-one convos, when you talk about one-on-ones, you're talking about the rep to manager discussion. What about manager to director one-on-ones, along with manager development for first-time management managers? So let's talk about that relationship a little bit and how to run, and we won't spend too much time, but I think it is important. How do you run an effective one-on-one with a manager and a director? Cara, I'll start with you.
Definitely. So it's actually a great question to ask, because the last 3 months, I've started working with our new manager in Charleston. So this is a remote first-time manager at our company. And we do check-ins and check-outs weekly. I think it's important to give that new manager the flexibility and the trust that they're going to do everything that they can. But our one-on-ones are really a safe place to just have that gut check. Like, is my instinct right? Am I doing this right? And also to provide honest and coaching feedback. So, this is a great thing we did this. Have you ever considered looking at it this way? And giving ideas, but I really try to use it as a space to not say like, this is right or wrong, or this is the path you should take. You're in a leadership position for a reason, but more so as a sounding board. So I asked the sales manager to come with the agenda that they need from me. And it's really for them to start their week to feel really good. Whereas at the end of the week, it's more so, what did we accomplish? What were the KPIs? What do you need help with next week to hold people accountable? But it's really for them and for me to provide the structure they need and support. That's really what it is for me today.
Yeah, I like that. Almost acting as a mirror for them a little bit. Leadership management actually sometimes be lonely, right? You're in this thing making some of these decisions and you're hoping that they're right. So just having that voice there, I like it. Mark, how do you run them differently from rep to manager director?
So, and I'll also talk about how I run mine with my boss too. I mean, I think so with one of our managers, I think about one-on-ones with him. The way it's different is we're obviously talking about his team in addition to just talking about him. Whereas with an individual contributor, we're solely focused on that person. One point that Cara made that's really important is allowing them to self-discover. If you find yourself in your one-on-one, just like sellers, if you find yourself in your deal talking too much, the idea is that you're asking the questions that generate the self-discovery on behalf of the manager or the individual contributor. I agree with Cara that you need to also let it be employee-led, meaning you have the questions that you know are important, but you also give that manager a chance to come present the solution as opposed to telling them what to go do. Now, I do think it's very different in terms of how like a VP is going to interact with the CRO. The reality of those one-on-ones is they still have to happen, just like your frontline manager and your individual contributor. But those tend to be a little more of what's on fire because there's a lot of putting out fires when you get into leadership. And Cara made a point earlier about being fulfilled by watching someone else have success. That's a huge part of it. You also have to be very fulfilled with eliminating obstacles for your team. And so a lot of what my boss, Jared, and I are talking about is more or less what's on fire. How can we help make it easier on our teams, our leaders to be more successful?
Yeah, I like that. That's a great point. And then there's also the idea, I don't know if you guys run these at your respective orgs. Do you ever do skip level, like one-on-ones in meetings?
Yeah, we do those probably like once a quarter.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I always want my team to feel very comfortable going to my boss if they can't. This just happened today. I'm in a meeting that I can't step away from, get a call from a rep that I can't answer. He immediately calls our CRO who gets him the answer. Nice. And luckily we're aligned enough where we feel good about the fact that we're doing the right thing and doing the same thing. And you have to create an environment where people feel comfortable doing that because that rep now feels way more supported and loves the access that they're getting to the boss's boss.
Yeah. I like that. All right. We have another great question. So I'm just going to keep this rolling. Okay. So this one is very specific. So I'm new to the role. I've only been leading a team for the last month. I am a peer who has been promoted to lead a team. So that's always tough, being a peer. And then now I've been there. It's a tough thing to navigate. And before that, there was no formal one-on-one structure. I have just now been speaking with the reps about getting some structure around it, but some reps are skeptical or not buying into it. What are some tips that you would give to someone like me? Mark, we'll start with you on this one.
Oh, I love this. Question. Okay. So the first thing is that you have to frame the one-on-one as the only reason I'm doing this is to help you. Hey, I get that we were peers a week ago, a month ago, but I know it's going to be important immediately and long-term that we have formal time to sit down once a week. Let's call it an hour. And sometimes we may not need the whole time. And it may be kind of awkward at first, but the whole design of this is to help you be more successful. So I get you think it's awkward. If I was in your shoes, I might think it was awkward too, but just travel down this path with me. And I think over time, they'll look at you in a different light. And I'm seeing a comment through, the consistency is critical. Jason, that is so true, that when you have this each week and they see the meeting happen and you start to form a relationship where you can coach that individual and they're paying attention and seeing the benefits, no longer are you just the rep who was in the pit with them a minute ago. Now you're leading that person.
Yeah. That's kind of servant leadership mentality. Cara, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think that a really important part about one-on-ones, and especially making it look more formal, is the buy-in, right? They have, like, for example, when I started managing our remote office in Charleston, we had a one-on-one doc that we were using in New York. But New York is very type A. Charleston is really laid back, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you had to adjust the way you coach and the way people go to lunch in Charleston. New York, I've never had a lunch break, Yeah. And so instead of saying like, this is the way it's done, I think you can present a couple options, right? Give a menu technique. Hey, this is what we're doing in New York. Some reps have really like this. These are ways we're thinking about looking at our pipeline. These are ways we're using coaching for feedback. And let the team really come up with the right structure. But you give them the ideas, right? And I think that if there's this mutual understanding of, hey, I had input in the way I want this meeting to run, but the manager also had the ability to say, like, these are the options, you come to a place where both people feel like, okay, I can get behind this because I had an input. And it also is going to mean people are going to hold themselves accountable to coming to the one-on-one prepared because they had a say in it. So I think it has to be a mutual buy-in. Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that. Anytime you can get the other party or person involved to, almost feel like it's their idea, or at least be collaborating in the process is huge. Hey, maybe do you want to get out of the office and do a walking one-on-one? Is that your style? Do you want to do it at the end of the day on a Thursday over a beer? Like what will make this, enjoyable for you? I think is huge. Okay, so
on the walking one-on-one, I got to jump in on that.
Yeah,
for this person who asked the question. That's a great way to do your first couple.
Yes.
It feels more informal. You still are getting a chance to have the conversation. Also, when you're walking with just one other person for 30 minutes, you have their attention. It's just you two. You're out of the office. They might open up about something that they typically wouldn't. So that's a great suggestion, especially for the person who's new in the role.
Yeah, it does. It feels so much more casual. And I promise you, like, if you do this, again, consistently, you make it casual and you're actually helping, in a few weeks' time, your reps will love your one-on-one. They will look forward to that time. I know personally, I'm lucky to have a fantastic leader that I roll up to in Max. And when I have my one-on-ones, I'm like taking it all. I'm picking his brain. He's acting as my therapist. He's, it's the best ever. It's free therapy and like a life coach. Like use it all. Use it all. All right. Well, this is insane. We have like 10 more questions already, but I want to formalize. We'll go through a few things because we do want to touch on a few things. Okay. So I want to first kind of talk about the problem, which has already been illuminated, I think, via the poll and just the sheer amount of questions that we're getting. But in your eyes, Cara, what's the problem with ineffective, sales one-on-ones? What does that eventually lead to? I might be killing it now, but if you're not having good one-on-ones, it might not happen for too long. What are some of the problems?
So I think, you can name a bunch, but I think really is the rep should feel, when they leave a one-on-one, they should feel empowered. They should feel excited, rejuvenated. If they don't feel that, they're going to feel lost, confused. They might not have the direction that they need. And although salespeople, we're really social human beings, that also might be something that gets held in and bubbled up until it's a little too late, right? So I think that giving someone the ability to feel good after a one-on-one is crucial. And if there isn't that feeling, then there needs to be a change in the way the one-on-one is done, because ultimately you want to make sure your employees are happy and they're feeling heard. And if that's not the case, unfortunately, they won't be there. And I think that it's our job as managers to make sure we are the first line and really aware of how our sellers feel.
Totally. Yeah. It certainly leads to that feeling of being disconnected. And even if it's not full disconnected, even not feeling like your growth or you're growing or on a path can have really negative consequences to performance.
And I think right now, because we are remote, it's even more important to make sure that you walk away from a one-on-one feeling some sort of connectivity, or it's honestly just being heard right now. I think being heard, how you feel, how you're acting, whether it's about your pipeline or really just like my anxiety is really high because I'm watching the news and I'm in my studio apartment in Manhattan alone, right? Whatever that might be, I think right now it's even more important than ever to feel heard. Yeah,
for sure. We're getting scolded from Mike Andrews. Can you turn off your iPhone sounds, please? So everyone silence your notifications. That could have been me. I'm the I'm not sure. Thank you for the heads up. That's a great reminder, Mike. We should all be making sure that we do that when we go into our one-on-ones. All right, Mark. What are other some two other problems when you're having ineffective or non-existent one-on-ones?
Yeah. So the main thing is, are you having the one-on-one? Is it consistently happening, right? So the first thing is, are you actually doing them on a consistent basis? Let's call it once a week. If you do have them, are they documented? So is the conversation documented somewhere? Some of you may be like, oh, that's too formal. Trust me, you got to write down what is discussed, or have the employee write down what is discussed. Mm-hmm. The third piece that, okay, let's say it is documented. Is it tied to data? Is the coaching program or problem that you're working through, are you tracking a KPI that is related to this coaching program? So if you're having them, if they're documented, if they're tied to a KPI, then you're able to look through them historically and say, okay, last week we worked on this. Where are we this week? For the last quarter, we focused on ambition example, MedPick. How are we doing following the MedPick steps? How does pipeline look inside of our MedPick process? So you have to make sure those pieces are happening so you know your coaching actually works, and that when you can pivot and turn to the next initiative. One other thing I'll add real quick that I see missed a lot in one-on-ones is the flexibility to put new initiatives in the one-on-one. Some managers, just like reps, think about when you're demoing, sometimes you get in that where you're demoing with your eyes closed almost, and that talk track just comes out and you miss the most important part that your prospect is thinking about. The same thing happens for managers. So when you have a new initiative, that also needs to be worked into your coaching program to ensure you're driving change throughout however many weeks that initiative's moving. So that's just another big miss I see, is that they don't work in the new initiative to help drive change.
Yeah. That's such a big, that autopilot, I think, is a salesperson's biggest enemy, is getting into that.
We've
routine.
all been guilty.
Oh, of course. You're guilty with it, with your significant other. We all go into these like patterns, like I think they're called heuristic patterns in our brain, that when you see something, you just go into that mode. And you need to find ways to snap yourself back to the present moment. Or I think that's one of the biggest
when you
things.
Notice that's happening, and we talk about this with our sellers, is just pause and ask a question, even if it feels like an awkward pause, because you know when it's happening, you can feel it. And so take a deep breath, ask the question.
Totally, I like that. So one thing a story I'll share to highlight something you said about documenting, because that's so important. It's not just about having them. So when I was a young manager, first time managing a business development team, I wouldn't document. I prided myself on being ultra present. So I would remember everything. I was like, I don't need to document these things. I'm just going to be there. I'm going to give this person my undivided attention. And that's what it means. And I had this one rep, and I can still remember exactly. He was so good at one-on-ones. He was also just as present, and we'd have these great engaging discussions. We'd solve all these problems and give him all these things to work on, but his numbers weren't improving. He was middle of the pack, and they would never improve. And over time, I couldn't figure out why. And finally, we got to this place where I was giving him the same advice, and I finally realized I was giving the same advice 5 times in a row, and he wasn't implementing it. Mm-hmm. Finally, we got to this place, and he was like, man, so I was so almost kind of nervous and wanting to impress you that I was so present that I would kind of black out during our one-on-ones. The actual stuff we were talking about, I just wanted to make you happy and like me more than anything.
On first dates,
Yeah. Right? It's kind of like when you meet someone and you shake their hand and they tell you your name, and you have no idea what they said because you're trying to, almost impress them or figure them out and all this stuff. So it was super interesting. And I could have probably realized that much sooner if I had documented things, because I could have been like, hey, we talked about this last week and I didn't see any change this week. What's going on? But instead it carried on for a few months because I wasn't documented.
Yeah, and I think it's also the follow through of the manager to make sure we're coming back from the last week of saying, hey, we discussed this, we had this whole great game plan, like what happened? And I think sometimes, if you're managing a ratio that's not really ideal or things get in the way, if you forget to follow through is also like on the manager's job to make sure that you can have that conversation every single week to see those results, because when they see the results at the end, they're like, oh, okay, got it.
Yeah. Now I should listen to you.
One lesson I had to learn on the follow-up piece, and I know this is also something that I see a lot of sellers do, is don't book the full hour in your one-on-one. Book it for 45 minutes. Give yourself 15 minutes at the end to follow up on the commitments that were made, the action plans you're going to create, the email you're going to send. Because if you're like me, you get out of one meeting, you walk straight into the next meeting, and then you get to the end of the day. Well, especially work from home right now, and 2 kids are all over me, and I probably forgot about that meeting at 9:30 this morning. So give yourself that buffer of 10, 15 minutes at the end to knock out some of the action items.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's huge. When you get to that point where you can bang out your action items on your phone in that 10 minutes, it's so much more enjoyable than at the end of the day when you have this to-do list. You'll still have a to-do list, but it won't be this big. It'll be like this big. All right. So a few things I want to tease out there. So kind of the basic elements of a one-on-one, what I'm kind of hearing is, foster a safe environment, ensure consistency. We talked about consistency. Someone highlighted it from the audience. Be ultra present. Document, which is a huge part of what I think people miss. Now let's talk about almost like advanced elements. So those, if you've been managing for a while, you're probably like, yeah, I got all that. What are some of the more advanced elements when we look at effective one-on-ones? And Cara, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think someone wrote in the chat, what about the rep that's over exceeding quota every month, right? Or what about the rep that isn't holding themselves accountable and not hitting their metrics? And I have to have those tough conversations. Obviously, those are 2 very different spectrums, but I'll go with the overperformer. I think you have to look at the future. You always have to give them a path to like what that could look like. And I think, you mentioned being, working with your manager, sometimes it's a therapy session. I think as a manager, it's your job to help guide them to what could be the right next move. So for example, and again, it doesn't have to be concrete, but I have a rep on my team who's never hit below 120% for over a year and a half, right? She's an absolute rock star sales rep, but she's looking for that next phase. And so we've really been working over the last, 2 quarters. What are the right skill sets that you really exceed in? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? How do we think about what a role looks like? And kind of giving her a little taste of that. So, hey, want to sit in on this meeting with me? This is a project that I'm working on. I'd like your eyes on that. Getting them involved and trying to figure out, is this something that they like? And we've been working on this for about 6 months, and we're actually building out a role for her. Assuming all goes well with, COVID. And it really is to be working with a sellers in ramp. And it's giving her that next step, but we wouldn't be able to be at this place to form a new role if we didn't really understand each other's motivations, understand each other's strengths and weaknesses, and long-term goal, right? Is your goal to be a CRO, or is your goal to be an enterprise sales rep, and understanding the different paths? So it's being a mentor to those overperformers and showing them what light looks like. So I think that's something, just always have what's ahead of you, because salespeople are ambitious. They want to know what's next.
Yeah, I think that's great tactical advice for those top performers or super high achievers. Your one-on-ones are almost like 3 to 5 year plans, and you're checking in on that side of how to get to them where they want to go. Because, like you said, they're overly ambitious. They always want that next thing, and you need to pay attention to that. What other things, Mark, are you seeing? Some of you do at Ambition, or some of your clients and customers do really well on kind of taking the one-on-ones to the next level?
So I'll stay hyper focused on what's happening right now and how that affects your one-on-one. This morning, our VP of marketing had shared Tomas Tunga's 6 traits of leadership in terrible time. I can't remember what the article is called, but one of the things he talks about when you're communicating right now that is hyper relevant to a one-on-one is being transparent, having candor, and talking with gravity. And I am a huge believer in a time like this. The worst thing you can do as a sales leader is just be like, guys, it's going to be fine. Like, everything's good. What are you worrying about? Because your sellers aren't thinking that way. They're loading LinkedIn and they're hearing about some layoff that just happened, and of course they're thinking how that affects them. And so, like, in this time of uncertainty, in a one-on-one especially, which is reason 7,000 why you need to keep your one-on-one or put one together with everybody on your team, is you have to give people space to have a real conversation like, man, this COVID sucks.
Yeah.
And to use Chris Voss, if you saw his thing he put out about how to negotiate, open the conversation with, this is a shit storm. Those are the exact words he uses. And you can use some of that with your reps too, because even if, Ambition, we have a great remote play and we're fortunate to have that, but it doesn't mean we're not having deals pushed because budgets get frozen. And that's really frustrating to a sales rep. And so you as the leader need to be transparent, have some candor about what's happening, and speak with gravity. And that puts you in a position to really connect with the person on the other end of the Zoom meeting in this case, and hopefully continue to develop that person even in what is a pretty difficult time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. And I want to highlight that candor or that casual conversation is often overlooked remotely, because everything's like, it's kind of a big deal, right? You got to put something on someone's calendar, and this is a VP or a director or a manager. They got a lot to do, and it seems like a big deal, versus when you're in the office, you can just walk by, ask that super quick question for 30 seconds. And I was talking to the gentleman who runs partnerships at Square and has been remote for a long time, and that was his biggest piece of advice, was making time for casual conversation and conversation that doesn't have to be fully centered around work, whether it's a virtual happy hour or all these little things, because funnily enough, in those casual environments, sometimes the real things bubble up a little bit more naturally, maybe. So that's another thing there. All right, we still got these questions rolling in, so I'm going to try and get to the Q&A really quickly here. But the two things I wanted to touch on, and then we'll just start banging out rapid fire questions if you two are into it. One is onboarding, right? So one-on-ones are great. What if I'm actually my first one-on-one with someone? What if they started during this environment? What if I'm starting someone next week? And I want to talk a little bit about that, of onboarding in a COVID world. Mark, I know you have some current experience with this right now. How have you changed? What have you adapted to? Can you walk me through that a little bit?
Yeah, with a new hire, so I don't remember where I heard this first, but someone who walks in your door for the first day, they're never more engaged than the day they walk in the door, because they are so damn fired up to start their new job. They're nervous, they're anxious, etc. When you think about that in this COVID world, there's a lot of uncertainty. And so we have a new account manager that just started, and one of the things that I'm hyper focused on with him is addressing a lot of the uncertainty, but also reassuring him of why he's here and what he's going to help us do and why that's important, et cetera. And so while it's very broad, it comes back to what I was just saying about transparency and candor, is that it's just that much more important with a new hire, because they're not sure what normal is yet. And they're walking into this shitstorm and thinking, what does this mean for me? I don't have the trust built up with everybody at the company yet to know whether I should be worried or not. I haven't proven myself yet to feel like I've got a leg to stand on. And so being, having that transparency and candor, but also just keeping your head down and helping them focus on the job at hand is probably the two things that I would point out for a new hire.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. Cara, anything on top of that?
Yeah, I would just add to that is to really try to make that new person feel connected. So set up, meet and greets with other people in the different departments or people within their role. And it doesn't have to necessarily be, Slack or Zoom or Google Hangouts, but I would really encourage video on. It's something I'm really big about. It adds a human element to it. Just being able to pick up the phone and call someone is great, but a lot of people are really missing that one-on-one interaction. So it also allows someone to say like, oh, this is the person I'm meeting for the first time, because you can't meet them in the office. But I think highly encouraging cross-team collaboration and just meeting people as if you were doing, lunches or coffee within the office.
Yeah, no doubt. Virtual lunches are a thing. We've done a few of them and they were actually really fun.
I did it.
And when they're done, you're like, wow, I'm already back. Like there's no driving. Or
it can be exactly 45 minutes and you can have a meeting right after it. Yeah, I like it. All right, last question for me, and then I'm going to let the community drive. Again, thank you everyone for really, really incredible engagement. I wonder if it's because everyone's just really needs human interaction, but it's been fantastic. So thank you all. Okay, so I want all of us to put our Nostradamus hats on for a little bit and do a little bit of predictions, because the world will return to normal eventually, but it won't return to the old way. I think it's really weird. We've like peeked behind the curtains now, and I think a lot of things are going to change. What are some predictions that you're thinking may happen in a post-COVID world? And Cara, I'll start with you.
So I've been thinking about this a lot, specifically for the industry that I'm in, which is restaurant technology and hospitality, which, as we all know, is definitely being hit the hardest. So when it comes to Resy specifically, I don't even know, if 70% of our restaurants are going to be back, right? We've done such a great job onboarding them and providing great value. I don't even know if they're going to reopen. But what I also know, looking at it optimistically, is for companies that are providing alternative technology that are effective and affordable, people are going to start looking at their budgets and say, okay, what is going to drive the most productivity for my team or for my company? What is going to, can I combine two things instead of using 3 different vendors? Is there a vendor that does those things in one, right? So I think that there is going to be this idea of, okay, I look at my budget and I want to buy and I want to be more effective. So the companies that have really taken on and innovated on a product in the last few years, I think we're going to have a really great opportunity to show value. Mm-hmm. I think the empathy level is going to have to be really turned up a notch, and understanding the pressure sale is not going to work. People are going to be scarred for a really long time. A burning platform, I know right now, urgency is really difficult to build. I think we're going to have to think about urgency in a different way, because people are not going to be making decisions quicker. They're going to take their time and be a little bit more meticulous in their decision making. But I'm optimistic. I think that we'll figure it out. And especially, in the startup world, we're always thinking about ways where, as Mark said, we're putting out fires. So this is just another way to just shift. And I'm really positive and confident that everyone will be able to shift. It just will look a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those are strong predictions. And I do think everyone will be almost a little like, everyone's kind of been forced to slow down. So it's kind of forced thoughtfulness a little bit. Everyone's going to look a little deeper, a little harder at some of their purchasing decisions. And I do believe you're right. Urgency is not a tactic that will be effective in sales in the near future. Mark, what are some of your post coronavirus?
One I hate is that people aren't going to shake hands as much anymore. I'm a big handshake guy. I like to every time. So now there's going to be a lot of elbow bumps, which I guess is fine. I want to get behind the old Barry Bonds, Jose Canseco, throw your arm into each other. It's something cooler than a fist bump or elbow bump. But my work prediction would be that it's really, and we see with our clients too, it's the Fortune 500, the old school companies that would have never in a million years sent that call center employee to work from home, who just got forced to do that very, very quickly. my hope and my assumption is that they're going to, that frontline employee is going to outperform what old school leadership thinks they would from home. And not that work from home will all of a sudden be the new normal for, you name it, Fortune 500 company. But I do think people are going to warm up to that much faster, and the flexibility of working from home, even for a super old school company, will start to come to light. I mean, if I'm a head of HR at a big company right now, and I'm getting a lot of positive feedback from my team that's sitting at home, and I'm seeing results, I'm thinking, okay, how do I work that into a benefit for our employees? So I think it's going to happen for everybody, but I really think about the big enterprise companies who would have never thought this was an option until they got forced to make it happen.
Yeah, totally. I'll pile on top of that. And also, I think, Mark, you mentioned this when we were discussing this webinar, of like, managers and leaders are also going to realize that they enjoy it as well, right? Which might push it forward a little bit. I agree. I think remote will become much more normalized. You know, I think it will show, it's this forced trust exercise that we're all doing. And my bet, because I'm an optimist, is people are going to take that trust and do great things with it over this time period. I also think it just highlights, like, in a really big way, that the old way of prospecting is dead, like completely dead. Like where you just mass spray and pray and you're just banging out. Like people are just getting hammered on LinkedIn for, how are you doing this tactic during this time? But it's, the underlying message is, this tactic doesn't work regardless of the situation ever. And it's just kind of highlighting that now more than ever, and people are speaking out against it.
Scott, there's our boy Josh Braun, the deposit concept, right? Has never been more important than right now. Totally. I mean, the brand loyalty that you can build in the middle of a terribly uncertain time like this is something that can last years, decades. And so how do you make a deposit right now that isn't just, hey, I'm checking on you? I mean, come on. That's how you, when the storm passes, you rise above the others in what you do. But it's I mean, I think about our SDR team all the time and how they're outbounding, and are they leading with empathy? Are they communicating the right tone of message right now to not royally piss off the guy who's sitting at home with his 3-year-old who's screaming upstairs, you know? But you're right. It's totally going to change. But to the point that you're making, I think it's changing for the better. Agreed.
And I want to highlight something there, because Josh has this great concept where he talks about depositing before you withdraw. It's essentially giving value before you ask for anything, like a demo, discovery call, whatever. What I want to highlight, though, in this environment, and this is coming from experience. It's coming from last week, and I had people and partners and people that we work with giving in a really kind way. And I had also people asking because they're struggling and they need certain concessions, all these different things, right? They're worth double. You withdraw $100 right now, it's a $200 withdrawal, because let's say it's the bank analogy. That bank is also struggling. So when you're withdrawing, that $100 is more. On the other side, if you're giving $100, it's worth $200 in the bank right now. So just be hyper aware of that when you're out there. Okay, cool. I also think that those like weird tracky video call things will start becoming normal. I think we're all going to have one in our house. Just talk to our like grandparents and stuff. I don't know. I thought we'd never get there, but now in this world where we're all isolated, I'm like, shit, that would be kind of cool. All right. Question time. I'm just going to fire these out there. I might get both your perspectives. I might just get one. We have so many.
Let's roll.
This is Keith Crystal. Mark, I'll shoot this one to you.
Okay.
What do you say to your salespeople right now during this time of uncertainty and worrying about their families?
Boy, that's a good one and a tough one. I can tell you what we just told them yesterday. We had a a COVID-19 like State of the Union essentially as a company, and I had one with our sales team. And again, our remote play helps a little bit, but you still have to communicate to focus on what you can control and ensure that you're being transparent with them about the current state of affairs. I think a lot of sales managers worry that, well, if I communicate that it's not just their deals pushing, it's a lot of people's deals pushing, that all of a sudden they'll think about leaving. Newsflash, sales manager, they already know other people's deals are pushing. Like they talk about these things. And so I get the concern about family. That is very real. At the same time, you just got to focus on what you can't control, which seems like lame advice, but in a time like this, it's paramount.
Yeah, completely agree. Great advice. All right, we'll go next one. Cara, this one's for you. Very specific. I started in a senior BDR role 3 months ago. I have a team of 4 people. I run one-on-ones with a clear and structured agenda, but sometimes it's hard to have some of the reps leading the meeting. In trying to help them speak, I end up leading the meeting, which is not what I want. Any suggestion with this?
Yes. It's a great question. And I think this happens to a lot of people. It's happened to me many times, and I've learned to bite my tongue. So I think because you care and you want to help people, I think a really good rule of thumb is when you want to give advice, ask another question, a follow-up question, do more discovery, because a lot of the times they end up answering their own questions. I think you can think about your one-on-one as like, are they asking for advice or are they asking for just some direction, right? And kind of think about it in 2 different ways. And at the end of asking questions, instead of leading the conversation, you'll actually realize that they can actually solve their own problem. And if they can't, they're going to straight up say to you, so what do I do? And that gives you permission to say, oh, well, these are some ideas that I have. But I think you just have to keep asking questions and kind of bite your tongue, because at the end of the day, it's really getting them to realize that question. But is it direction that they want, or is it actual like a plan? And I think they don't know that. And it's our job to kind of figure out which part of the one-on-one does it belong to.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I'll actually add on top of that too. And it sounds like a broken record because myself and I think Mark says this all the time. Go Chris Voss's masterclass. This will help you specifically with that problem. And if you don't have time to do that, just Google mirroring and labeling. And that will help you tease out all the information that you need from your reps. But Chris Voss masterclass, it's cheap. Go get it. So worth it. Expense it. It's amazing. All right. Let's see. Cara, I'll go back to you with this one. Do you encourage your this is good. I might get both your opinions on this one. Do you encourage your managers, new and old, to seek feedback from the reps? If so, how do you approach that? I know many of our reps live in fear of sharing feedback with their manager about their management style. So I'm specifically curious about effective and respectful ways to coach up from rep to manager.
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts on this. In the past, our company decided it would be a good idea to do anonymous feedback per team monthly. That's a lot of feedback, right? That's like, what happened today? I need a vent right now. And I don't think it got the full spectrum of like how things are going. So then we moved those to quarterly. But again, it kind of had this lag of I'm waiting 3 months to give all my feedback and I can't have an honest conversation with my manager. So I think there's a lot of value in anonymous feedback, but I don't think on a cadence that you're limiting an ability to have a real dynamic conversation, an honest conversation with your seller. Mm-hmm. I think it starts from the beginning. When you have someone new on your team, Mark was mentioning going on a walk, I think that's great. You have to get to know them as actual people, not as sales reps, and have an open dialogue. And I think you have to show that you're open to feedback and not just say it, mm-hmm. right? People have to feel comfortable, and I always welcome feedback. It's something that's so important to growth. And it also means that I hope that my reps are open to my feedback. But I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I'm human. And I think that if you can show that you're vulnerable as well, they're going to be more open to giving you feedback. But I'm also very open to say like, hey, look, if you don't feel comfortable giving me feedback, like please give my CRO feedback. He's my boss. I want to make sure that you're comfortable and it works for you. So being okay with the skip level is great, but I think it's opening and fostering a relationship that people feel comfortable, that they don't have to hide behind anonymous feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And it starts, I think you mentioned it there, with that like vulnerability, like kind of like poke fun at yourself a little bit.
Totally.
Like, hey, I know I'm not great at this, you know, I miss some details sometime, you know, if there's anything else like that, can you please help me out? That's huge. Yeah, anonymous feedback is a bit of a weird thing. I think they tried that with some social media app where everything was anonymous and it just turned into like the most evil shit ever. So there needs to be a little bit of accountability, I think, there. Mark, what are your thoughts here?
I'll give you one question to ask someone on your team that usually elicits an answer, because salespeople love to complain, is hey, what's one thing I'm asking you to do that feels like a waste of your time? And they'll probably tell you like some meeting that it does nothing for them generating revenue, or some non-sales meeting that they have to sit in on that feels like a waste of time. That helps people open up. But as far as how they coach you, every one-on-one, the last question you should ask is, how can I help you? Maybe that should be the first question, but I like it to be the last question. And through consistency, when it happens every time, and you, to what Cara just said, are actually listening when they bring these things up, they'll start to feel more and more comfortable about how they can manage up. And if you don't have sellers managing up, then they're probably not comfortable making suggestions, because trust me, they have them. Mm-hmm. So you have to be able to create that sense of alignment where they feel comfortable enough surfacing something that can make the team better, can make you better.
And also to that, I think it doesn't have to necessarily only be in a one-on-one setting. I think utilizing team leads is a really great opportunity to have a voice for the team, because a lot of the times, as we know, sellers talk, they're always talking about everything together. And so if one person's really feeling frustrated, everyone knows. And so if it's a frustration based on a process change and not necessarily direct to your manager, the team lead can really bubble that up and be the voice. And so we do bi-monthly one-on-ones in a group setting for our team leads. And then we also have them do skip level above the managers, so that there is a voice being heard. So if you don't feel comfortable in your one-on-one, you can have another, voice, and hopefully it gets to the manager, so then it can actually get dispersed on the ground. I think it's a different technique that I hadn't used in the past, and I think it's been really successful.
I love that. All right, I'm going to sneak in one more question, and I like to always ask this question now at the end of these. So you both have had tremendously successful careers, and a lot of people would look at it as, a model career path of what a lot of people want to do. If I created a time machine and I grabbed Cara and I grabbed Mark, and we were able to go back to when you're first kind of starting your career, what advice would you have for, 21, 22-year-old Cara and Mark? Cara, I'll start with you.
Great question. And as you're saying, I'm a pretty positive person. I don't really look back and say, I should have done it this way, because I really think, if you see right here, it says everything happens for a reason on this little chart. I really believe that. It is, you're always going through a different path. But advice I would give to someone in that, when I was 21 years old, is just be a sponge. There's nothing bad that you're learning. Everything is good. Take in the good, take in the bad. You have to put in the work to get to where you want to be, right? And sometimes you have to take a step back to move 2 steps forward, and that's okay. So if you really have your path of what you want to do, it's not a direct stepping stone. But if you think about the next job that you want, what is this job now? Is it going to set me up for my next jump? And is the jump 2 steps ahead, or is it to the side? It doesn't matter. But is the job that you're in right now putting you in the best position for your next stepping stone? That's really what I think about. And that's all about being a sponge in the role that you're in today.
I like it. Thank you.
No problem.
Strongly agree. It actually reminds me of a Charlie Munger quote, which is one of my favorite quotes. And it's, to get what you want, you have to deserve what you want. And it sounds so unbelievably simple, but I think at that point, you're just building your right to deserve the life that you want. You're doing that through building knowledge and acquiring skills. Mark, same question, man. What are you jumped in my time machine, hot tub time machine. We got some whiskey. What are you telling 21-year-old Mark?
So I'm a D on the disc profile. I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. I can't remember what my Myers-Briggs thing is, but think like I like to control the situation. And so what I would tell 21, 22-year-old Mark is there's more than one right path. And be present in the current step of that path, because you don't know where it's ultimately going to lead. I mean, if you talked to me a month ago and asked me about something with 2020, and now you talk to me now, it's totally different. Like we don't know what's coming next. And so be present, understand that the path may be that long winding road. But what highlights all of this, and Scott and I've talked about this before, read The Alchemist. It's such a good book, and it talks about this exact thing. The world that can be working to conspire to help you. And that path may feel long and windy, and you may feel like you made some mistakes along the way, but to what Cara just said, it's happening for a reason. I'm getting really cheesy, but I'm a cheesy guy too. So what can I say?
I love it. Thank you, man. And The Alchemist is a fantastic book, so go check it out. Well, Cara, Mark, thank you so much. That was a lot of fun for me. That felt like just hanging out with two good friends and talking shop. So thank you for both your insights. You have a ton of knowledge. And for everyone who hung out with us, thanks for such fantastic engagement. I think we got some of the most questions we've ever got. There's about 10 we didn't get to. So if you do have more questions, Cara, Mark, best way to connect with you both?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm super active, and I'm happy to, we have time. So happy to hop on a Zoom and chat. Yeah, awesome. Thank you guys for listening.
LinkedIn, please mention Sales Hacker in the top of the message if you can.
Yeah, perfect. And check out Ambition. Download the Resy app. Go out and support them. We all need to support each other at this time. And thanks again for hanging out with us. And stay safe and healthy.